Hey everyone, welcome back to Beauty School Bobbi. Today I am here with Gordon Miller, and Gordon is somebody who I know you have probably listened to his podcast before, Social Beauty Makers, and we are so excited to have you here with us today. Now, one of the things that I love about you, because I think that it's really hard when I was thinking about intro, what do I say that you've done? I want to get into that in the podcast because you've worked in almost every single section of the beauty industry, but I love that in your Instagram bio, it says industry futurist, and I love that idea of looking towards the future. And I think that that's really that really sums up, I think, kind of what you've done. It seems like from other people that I've talked to in the industry, you were always the person that was looking ahead. What's next? Where are we going? What are we doing? So you've lived, I think, a few years ahead of everyone else, for a while. So first of all, welcome to the show. I'm so pumped to have you here. And also, what is it when people ask you what you do? If your friends ask you what you do, or you meet somebody new, like out in the wild, what do you tell them?
My mother's 88, and I've been trying for the last 46 years to tell her what I do. and I usually say to her, she knows it's a beauty industry, but she still doesn't understand 40-some years later. I say I talk for a living. And basically, you mentioned the podcast. I do a lot of public speaking, but I've been a power networker almost from day one of my career. I started at the national level in '86 at Pivot Point. They brought me to Chicago after I had already been working in schools in Denver and Utah. And Leo Passage just taught me probably within a few months the power and importance of just networking and networking with intention and what it can do. And that's been such a huge part of my career. Thinking about the future. Thank you for mentioning that. To me was always about, having the context of the industry and first and foremost context relative to our challenges. To really think about the future, you have to understand what's not quite working today. And then Deborah Neal with Neal Corp is the person who's called me first a futurist. I'm like, I'm going to borrow that. I like that. She also said to me recently, well, you're also a historian. I'm like, I don't have any more room in my bio on Instagram, but I have a huge passion for history in this industry. And there's not a lot of it documented. And I spent 10 years as executive director of the National Cosmetology Association. And that's an old school association that started in 1920. And one of the members, who was also a past president, when I knew her, she was 98 years old and still doing hair.
Wow.
And she knew all the history, and she for some reason kind of attached herself to me. She would call me all the time. Miss Ruth Aiken was her name. We called her Miss Ruth. And she would just call me and literally give me history lessons. She's like, I'm calling to give you another lesson. And would talk me through the 1930s and 40s and 50s. I mean, it was just so brilliant. And so history is important to me. In Social Beauty Makers, I do consulting. I do education. I do a lot of work in the digital space. I'm obsessed with AI. I'm obsessed with digital learning. I think they're both areas where we have so much work to do as an industry. And then in BeautyCast, I'm really have returned to the school industry. Something I left in 1998 after being president of Milady, and then went into the association space. So it's fun as I kind of get to the later years of my career to kind of circle back to schools, because students have always been my biggest passion. Young people, even as my career progressed, I always was focused on and concerned with young people.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, and you mentioned this, like to understand the history of where we've been, like what's been happening to get us where we are. Like both of those things are so important. I don't think that you can have one without the other. And I think you're so lucky to have had people that you were able to talk to about how things were and what we need to be doing different and what do we go back to? What do we leave in the past? I think that that's really important too. I'm in a place right now where, I came into the school very like, we're going to make all these changes and we're going to do this and all these things. And then you're like, oh, wait, there's a reason that things are done the way that they are. And I love when I meet people that have that fire in them to be like, well, what if we try this? Or what if we try this? And I have to catch myself with Steven to be like, because I've been in, this middle where I've worked with his dad for years before Steven, and then with Steven. And now I'm like, I have to catch myself to not be like, well, we tried that and it didn't work. Or there's certain things that I want to let a young person like really run with and be like, yes, you can do this better because your brain was trained completely different than mine was. But also to be like, okay, well, I understand why we do things this way. And there is like a reason, so there's both. Like there's things that we can be open-minded to changing. And then there's things that we're like, okay, well, we have to understand why we do the thing in the first place. And it's really funny when I catch myself, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember like I really wanted to switch that. And I really wanted to make this big change that I know, wouldn't have been the best. So I'm at a place right now, I'm really realizing both of those things.
And it's context, right? I think it's one of the most important words in how I think about life and career and the industry. Context, like when we think about where we're at, well, where do we fit in something that's much larger today and in the past?
Yeah.
And both those things give us a tremendous amount of context, and it's really powerful.
Yeah. Well, I want to say just super thankful for everything you have done in the beauty industry. I haven't met a person that is spoken more highly of than you as far as somebody who is who knows what they're doing in the industry, who like really understands like what is happening in the industry. I've talked to so many people that are like, have you ever talked to Gordon, or have you met Gordon? Or that's come up a lot of times for me. And you really have cemented yourself as an expert in this industry on a bunch of different things. So thankful for that, and want to make sure that we don't get through this podcast without recognizing that as in the beauty industry, like you really are somebody that is just a staple. And there's not many of those. You have your like pillars, and I definitely want to acknowledge that you are that and like spoken so highly of in the way of the industry. So
hang around long enough and
yes. Well, I want to get into a topic with you that when I was thinking about what I could talk to you about that would be helpful for my audience, which is younger, newer stylists, beauty school students, high school students that are thinking about coming to the industry. So if we're even going like that far into the new, for somebody that is so experienced, I have heard, and there's been this thing kind of spinning in my head, and I'll see it, either on social media or hearing it from students that are in high school classrooms. But this idea that the beauty industry owes us something. There's a lot of change in the beauty industry right now, as far as how we're doing things in the salon, right? And I think that, and maybe this is different, or you may be like, oh my gosh, I remember this time when it felt like this. But for me, and being in the schools, it feels like we are at a place where there's just not like one path for everybody, which is super amazing, but it's figuring out, if you go this route, what's best for you? If you go this route, what is best for you? And there's a bunch of different ways, and just trying to figure out how to guide people in the best way. What is being, on social media, what is out there, what you can see if you're not in the industry is still that this idea that the beauty industry isn't great to work in because you don't get breaks and it's hard on your body and it's blah, 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 blah. And it's all of these things, these maybe not so positive things. People are getting famous off of and getting a lot of attention off of this like complainy kind of mentality, and of this way of like, well, it shouldn't be this way. And I'm, like there's just a bunch of different personalities talking right now, which is everywhere. But what I think that a lot of people think that when I get out, I'm owed this really successful career. I'm owed this like book of people that's going to line up to see me. And if I take enough classes and if I put myself out there enough, I deserve something. And as I was thinking about that, and as I was thinking about where do we go with this, who can I talk to? It was you. I'm so interested on your opinion about where we stand today with people coming into the industry and what is owed to us.
Oh, that's so interesting. So context, again, I think is one of the more important words for this conversation. And it comes from different couple different places. So first of all, the larger world, because I always say that we're very much a mirror image of the larger world. Today, coming out of COVID, we talk a lot about generational changes. Well, the whole world's talking about generational changes. We talk a lot about uh, in general life, we have all the things, whether it's the news or whether it's politics or whether it's just how we live our lives. There's all kinds of information that's flowing all over the place. And I think most people, at least in America, really today, regardless of their personal politics, agree that we have this thing called fake news. It's just like it's become a thing. And more probably correctly labeled misinformation. And there's good information. But the world collectively has struggled to figure out what's right, what's true, what's factual, and what's not. And because we've been so bombarded with information. So that's number one. Number two, in the larger world, and I'll do a dotted line to our industry on both these, but it is that traditional media has kind of, in many ways, lost its mojo. And these are the bigger thought leaders in the world who study this stuff and look at it and just there's all kinds of metrics and data to support things. And so the traditional media that people like me grew up with, they don't have the influence that they once had. They don't have the audience that they once had. And it's been very much replaced by social media as a platform. It used to be broadcast television, then it was cable television. Now it's social media as the number one place where most of us go for our news. And unlike pre-social media, when we kind of knew where to look, you want to know the news, you went to a network or you went to some of the renowned, historically broadcast places, whether it was a network or whatever. In my day, it was you listen to Walter Cronkite, and everybody trusted Walter Cronkite. Well, today it's all been turned upside down, and so information, good and bad, is just it's like a fire hose, and people are struggling to find out what's true, and people are just grabbing onto what makes the most sense to them. And so I think, a lot of people are making decisions in their lives and their careers based on bad information. And the same is true in our industry. We have very little media left that's relevant, in my opinion. Now, I was in the media space for close to 10 years. I was publisher of American Salon, both print and digital. I was the CEO and president of Hairbrained and helped them grow to where they've gotten. And, they're still doing great stuff. And, but to me, the glory days of media, which the industry depended on for so much, for so many years, are kind of over. Again, those platforms still exist, and individually they still do what they do, and a lot of people love them, but it's not what it once was. And it's been replaced by people who have found big followings or perhaps developed big followings because of what they're saying and how they're saying it. But a lot of that's tapping into what's called enragement engagement. You throw a firebomb of information out into the internet or onto social media, and sometimes it gets you a lot of attention. All of a sudden, you're the next person who's an expert, even if you're not. And so the information that's flowing around the world and in our industry, it's just really hard for people to kind of sort their way through it. And almost all of that is tied to money, including the media, by the way, including the media. So, it's capitalism, but there's a lot of benefit in throwing that firebomb. And some folks are making a lot of money by putting out bad information, including in our industry. So it's a hard time, especially for young people. And, you find somebody who's really engaging, who does really cool hair and has a really cool vibe. And you look up to that person and they're saying stuff perhaps that's just not based on anything except maybe their own personal experience. Mm-hmm. And we all have our own personal experiences, and often, especially as we get bigger with followings in our names, we can do things successfully that are almost impossible for other people to do because we have so many resources. And maybe we have some secret sauce in who we are as a professional that allows us to do something different perhaps than most. And so I think the biggest challenge the whole industry faces is sorting out the truth, but also sorting out a truth for a person who's saying something that may not be a truth for me. Mm-hmm. And that's tricky. And the best example of that is so many young people moving into independence, and I would say too soon. And the analogy of that for me is when I came into the industry 40 some years ago, very little has changed over the course of my life in the industry, except the kind of things I just talked about, but how the industry works and what works and what helps people build careers. The things that I was told, 40 some years ago, they still count. And one of the things that I remember so clearly in the first beauty school I worked in, which was a total mistake in my life, by the way, I had no intention of being in the industry. And when I got here, I was like, I'm not staying here very long. And then 90 days later, I was like, I love these people. But the owner of that chain of schools in Denver, Colorado, back in the early 80s, late 70s and early 80s, in my very first time being in a cosmetology classroom where the owner brought me in and she did a school orientation, literally the first time I was really in a school paying attention. She said to the students, most of you probably want to own your own salon. And she says, I think that's wonderful. Some of you can do it successfully. Some of you, may struggle with it. Some of you may not get there. My best advice to every one of you as a former salon owner who grew up on a dirt farm in North Dakota, who had nothing, and now is a successful person in the industry, my best advice is wait. You need to go out and learn how to do what you are trained to do, which is to do hair, take care of your clients. And while you're doing that, pay attention. Pay attention to how the business is being run, for good or for bad. Learn what works, learn what doesn't work. Find mentors. And this was 40 some years ago, and it still holds true. And it's the best advice I think we can give anybody in the industry. The most risky job in the industry today, statistically, is being an owner. Whether you are owner of a salon suite and you're by yourself, whether you're the quote unquote owner of a chair because you're renting it, or the owner of a traditional or rental salon, the failure rate in self-employment in America generally and in our industry is higher than the failure rate of people who go to work, for somebody, and it's important to know that all of us are not built to be self-employed. We're just not.
Mm-hmm.
But my best advice to anybody who wants to be self-employed, go learn how to do it before you do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely believe that. And I think as a school, being responsible for showing like all sides, like I've heard it, like we do these like review sheets at the end. And recently we had one that said, I feel like they didn't encourage suites enough. I feel like they didn't encourage going out on your own. And it's not, we teach a whole business class where they have to open up a salon and power, like all of those things. Like we make them do it to say, okay, wait, this is, there's a lot of things that I'm not considering. The students, I feel like, and again, this is majority speaking. This is definitely not everybody. This is a generalization, but a lot of people, feel like that's their path and that's what they're going to go do. So we need to now prepare them as part of, their schooling for what that's going to look like and what they need to do. And we stand like firmly like with you in the idea of like, go learn, go figure it out, make mistakes on other people's job. We tell them that. And there just still is this pushback from them. And then I battle with, well, I want to encourage you, but I'm a mom, I'm a parent. So I get that like sometimes just saying like, here you go, I'm going to hand it to you is not helpful, and in the time, like it's hard for them to realize that, that's not exactly what we're setting them up to do, but it is because we've seen people, again, going back to the idea that it's really important that we know what's happening behind us, what's happened in the past to move forward now in the place that we're in right now. And I don't know, I'm sure you do, but I don't know the specific numbers of what students going into their own suites, their own situation of a salon ownership, what that actual number is right now, because I know it's just every year on the rise at like what age, but what is you studying kind of future, like what's happening? Where do you stand on this now? Is it that it depends on the person? Is it depends on the student? Or is there a track for everybody that would set them up statistically for higher success?
Well, again, going back to when I started, and this hasn't changed all these years later, which is, the one of the foundations of being successful, whether it's behind the chair, whether it's as an owner, whether it's as a renter, a suite owner, any of them, is education. And we understand that so well as an industry when it comes to how to cut hair, how to color hair, how to style hair, all the things it takes to do hair. It's not even questioned. You go to a beauty show, there's hundreds of classrooms, hundreds of classes, sometimes that many classrooms, and all kinds of stuff going on, all kinds of stuff. 80-90% of it is technical, and classrooms are full, and people are coming back year after year. I've met people, at places like Sassoon Academy who are in their 60s, who say, I've been coming back every year, for 30, 40 years, because you never stop learning. And that's how I stay inspired, as well as how I stay good. So we get that. But for some reason, and it's not talked about hardly at all, we don't apply the same logic to running a business. Running a business is way harder than doing a haircut. Sorry, it just is. I don't pretend that I'm an expert at either of them, but I do my best on the business side because that's the lane that I live in. And to me, learning how to be successful in business has been a 40-some-year journey. I'm like that hairdresser who is striving to be great at doing hair, who's going back to Sassoon Academy at 60. I'm still every day making efforts to learn more about how to be successful in what I do, which is being in business with BeautyCast, being in business for myself. I mean, it takes a lot. So the idea that anybody should be advised to leave beauty school, where you have honestly just touched the surface of the foundation. You've learned the foundation of what it takes to be successful. Now you got to go get your practice and get your experience and continue to learn for the rest of your career. The idea that you can come through school where you've gotten a certain number of hours of business information and perhaps education, that you're prepared to be self-employed, you're prepared to perhaps lead a team, you're prepared to, in a suite, whether it's to work all by yourself in your lonesome or with perhaps a suite mate or an assistant, and lead that business. It verges on nonsensical relative to what we know about creating success. And we just don't talk about that enough. I think we should be talking about it from the first day that people come into this industry. And I think we should be banging the drum louder on it, because, to be honest, today, statistically, I don't know the stats on age. No one keeps track of them. But we know today that about 70% of everybody in the industry is self-employed. 70%. That's a combination of everybody who's renting a chair or a suite and everybody who owns a salon or a commission salon or a rental salon. 70% of everybody is self-employed. That number was nowhere near that 10 years ago.
No, and I'm actually surprised that it's that high right now. Mm-hmm. Like, did that surprise you? Like 70 seems extreme. Like, what other industry?
COVID. No, there's none. I can't find one. I can't find one. Like, and so that should tell us something's wrong. That should tell us something's wrong. Going back to your very first question, and this was a dotted line, from this point, is what does the industry owe us? Nothing. Mm-hmm. Life doesn't owe us anything, in my opinion. It's up to us to go out and get the resources, figure out what we want out of life and find our own path there. But to think that we're owed by an industry. Now, are we owed by the school that we chose to go to and give money to? Yes, that's a transaction. We did this. The school told us they would do something else. So yes, we're owed. And by the way, we owe the school our attention, our attendance. It's a two-way street. It's a transaction, right? Both sides.
Yeah.
Career, are you owed by your employer because you work there in exchange for money? I would say yes. Again, it's a transaction. You owe one another. The salon owner owes you what they promised to do for you in exchange for you showing up to work every day, and vice versa. You owe them your attention and your time and working hard, So, but life, no. The industry, no, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think just as you were talking to, I was thinking about how there is this idea, and I love that you said it. I think there's things that are clicking now. I'm like, oh yeah, this, but you saying that we're getting all this extra training and technical skills, and that's something that you as a person can control, right? Like you're learning how you do this cut, this color, this thing. It's all so personal. What switches very quickly when you become a business owner? And again, something I've learned the hard way 1 million times. I mean, I think as an owner of anything, like you learn these lessons and it's what you do with that is so important. But it's on the control of somebody else. When you're owning the business, you're not, I mean, there's things you can control. You can control your pricing, but you're now reacting. You're now reacting to this person's out. I've got to hire. I've got to get this. Oh, well, guess what? This is on back order. So I can't, it's now reactive and less controlled. So I actually think that that is something that even more needs to be discussed, of how you're going to, your brain is going to have to switch into how you're thinking about doing things. Because if you are in a salon and you're like, okay, well, I have to get these clients and I have to meet these, my goals to get here or there, whatever system that you're in, because it's hard to generalize that because every salon is so different. But when you're doing that, it's all on you, and it immediately switches. And what skills are needed to be able to handle that? And I would love to be able to, I'm like I love processes and I love structure. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I would love to be able to have some sort of test of, and I know there's Enneagram and like all that stuff, but it would be really great for students to be able to, test themselves a little bit before. Now, will that matter? Or, mine's made up. I think that there's a couple things happening. Is the one thing that we hear the most is, well, I want to make my own schedule, right? And this is the generational things that I think that we were talking about, or, touching on a little bit earlier, is, this, I'd rather have more time than more money and all of that. And I think that that's something that we've got to navigate just as a whole everywhere, not just our industry. We've got to, figure that out. But it's also that, setting them up for that success and setting them up to be ready, because I've talked to salon owners and they're like, oh, so-and-so left and they opened their own place. And I'm so happy for them and I'm so supportive. That stuff matters. That encouragement and next step matters. But, I think even more importantly, it's equipping.
And it's not owed. There is a lot of conversation today about salon owners not supporting people who leave them and being upset about it. And there's a lot of trash talk about it. I worked there and I decided to leave and they weren't nice to me. But you're not owed that. You're not owed, when you take a job anywhere in any industry, that organization should or needs to be supportive of you when you leave. It's just not how the world works.
No, and I think immediately of like the NFL or like any major league team. Like, obviously when they leave, they're not going to be like, but we're going to be your number one fan and wear your jersey every day. Like, that's not going to happen. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Also, I think it's important to say that owners, for the most part, and there aren't good stats on this, but I would take a really good educated guess and say 80+% of every salon owner is still doing it. Every self-employed person, again, suite owners, renters, and salon owners, are still doing hair. So that means you have to navigate how to have two jobs, and they're completely different from one another. They have very little. They have almost nothing in common. So you have to be able to take that on. I'm going to have two jobs in one industry, in one space, but it's two very separate jobs. And I think what's most interesting, you said this when we started, is one of the bigger complaints about the industry is how hard it is. I don't get a break. And by the way, I've known people who've been taking breaks for 40 years. So you can have breaks, so it's not like there is no the Lord of the beauty industry who's on high saying no breaks. Some of us have been saying for 40 years, everybody take a break, have lunch for God's sakes, make yourself healthy, figure it out, understand your body, understand the capabilities of your body, what you can and can't take. We're all different, so this is part of how we have to think about making decisions to move our careers forward, is understand who we are. I think, again, we understand, I love hair color. I'm really creative, so I'm going to make that choice. I'm going to take those classes. We figured that part out. We don't take enough time to figure out the rest of it. And whether it is the work behind the chair, thinking about your health, thinking about your body, thinking about your mental health. And yeah, we're talking about it today more than we've ever talked about it. I don't think we're doing enough with it. And so much of it, again, lacks context. It's very reactive. We came out of COVID and it's like, oh, they want me to work so many hours and I don't want to do that. Now, you mentioned, a lot of people are like, I don't want to work so hard and money's not important. But we rarely hear that. It's typically, I don't want to work so hard. And so to me, that it's like, that's fine. You realize you're going to make less money, right? I mean, that's kind of how. I don't know anybody in this industry, and I know a lot of people, including a lot of young people. Young people have always been my favorite. I don't know anybody in this industry who's successful, who doesn't have their own version. It's important to say it this way: their own version of the hustle. The hustle matters. The hustle matters. You're doing this podcast. I know you're a hustler, or you couldn't do this podcast. You have more than enough, I'm sure, on your plate I come from schools. I know the workload that goes into it. So this is a hustle in a sense, and there's a lot more, that I've heard about you and a little bit I've observed, you're that person. I don't know anybody who's found longevity in their career who hasn't figured out how to make the hustle part of it. It's very personal. You want to work 20 hours a week, work 20 hours a week. It's all good. But find your own version of the hustle within the 20 hours. Use your time well. Because people who are like, oh, I spend so much time in the salon and, I'm busy, then I'm not busy and all the things that come with it. It's like, well, again, I get the frustration there. If you really kind of understood the power of the hustle in a specific, limited, not work yourself to death mode, but just using your time well, that could change everything in the schedule you have, make more money, have a better career. So I'm not opposed to working whatever schedule you want, but we have to accept that less means less. Less hours probably means less money. And if you don't have the good habits of using your time well when you're full time, I can tell you from observing, you won't have them when you work part time. You have to make that a foundation of how you think about your career and your life. Use your time well.
Yeah. You said something that got me thinking about another question on this idea of longevity. You've been in schools, so that you've probably heard it's the same exact term. Like, I know it hasn't changed, but like maybe just have it to put it in your back pocket. Maybe get that license just to have it in your back pocket, right? I feel like in this industry also, there's this idea that it can be temporary. It's something you can do just for a little bit. Instead, I think we need to switch our mindset into the longevity idea of this, and that it might not be forever, that you're not assisting forever. You're not, whatever the next steps are for you. And that, that might be salon management someday or whatever that is. The longevity idea of this industry is different also, that it's not always a career. Like when I was in college, when I was going to be a high school English teacher, that was career, right? Like that was what I was going to do until I retired. And I think a lot of people think of other industry. I'm going to go be a nurse and that's what I'm going to do I'm going to be a lawyer forever. Why? What is so different about this, that it's been this weird thing of this like short term, can be short term if you want it to be. It's almost like giving everybody an easy out already just coming into it, that it's not forever.
Well, and it's also, in my opinion, a way to set people up for failure.
I think so too.
Yeah, because, I think we're saying things sometimes, big picture, we're like the best of being a people-pleasing industry. We love to make people happy. And so many of the people in our industry in all kinds of jobs on the brand side, distribution and business ownership, the association space, the media space, those spaces are mostly populated by former working hairdressers, And so the people who kind of live on high in the industry, they want to please people too, And so I think sometimes nobody wants to offend. And say what maybe needs to be said, like what I just said, the hustle matters, the hustle matters.
Yeah.
I honestly believe if you're coming into this career to learn things and then put that in your back pocket, you should go do something else with your life. I honestly believe that because I think you'll have a better life. I actually do. Going to school to learn this industry, this trade, this craft, it's not easy. It's hard. It's hard work. It's great work. You can have a great life. I know so many people who have great lives at all kinds of different levels in all kinds of different ways. Not that everybody's making a fortune, but I know people who are. And I know people who've raised families and have this flexibility to raise a family and work sometimes full time and then go part time when their kids are younger and then go back. And, there's just so much flexibility and so many different things that you can do. But if you come in with an attitude that, you're going to, again, put that in your back pocket, or you're just going to kind of think of it as one of many options, then you're probably not going to get to where maybe you wanted to get eventually, because you're just not going to have the focus, so yeah, it makes me sad, I sometimes get in trouble for this, but I think it's especially important in a post-COVID world, but I was saying this 10, 20 years ago. I was like, sometimes when we talk about what it really takes to make it, I'm like, hello, where are the grownups? Like, where are the people who've lived this, and who can share their experience and their wisdom again, to say to younger people, you're from a different generation. You have different ideals. You have different ideas about life. We get that. And I'm not here to criticize any of that. You have to figure out how to live your life. But I can at least share my story and what happened and what we've seen and what we've learned and what that data is. So you can do something with it versus telling people, I think, sometimes too much what they want to hear or hope to hear and buying into sometimes new ideas, which for many people are actually bad ideas.
Yeah. No, it's so honest too. And I love that. And I love that we talked about this when we met recently in Houston, about your honesty and just how you're like, I would rather just say it. And that is so hard. And I think that you brought up a good point of it being like this industry. We do all want to like make people happy and make people feel good. And so it's like these personality traits that are coming in that are affecting all of these things as well. It's complicated, and it's not, again, every industry has their challenges and stuff, but I do think that there's a lot of different opinions coming in, and there has to be like an area where you can hear truth. Like you said at the beginning, like where we can speak in truth and share actual facts. And that's not always, who's talking the loudest, in the industry. So I think that there's that too.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. So you're going to say we're creative also?
We're creative, and dotted line from creative is emotional. They come together, and that's not a bad thing. Nothing wrong with emotions, and there's certainly nothing wrong with creativity. But in many ways, it's the opposite of kind of that left. We're very right-brained as an industry, and the left brain is more analytical, and the right brain is more creative. And on the right brain also is where a lot of our emotions live. And so when we kind of get in that little silo, we often are not exposed to or don't hear the left brain stuff, which is the data, which is the experience, which is okay, this is not so easy. Here's this. You mentioned systems and processes. You want to own a business, whether a business of one or a business of many. If you don't have systems and processes somehow, some way, whether you build them yourself, whether you use an app, whether you use software system, whatever, lots of ways to get there. But if you can't look at what you're doing and say, yes, I have a systematic approach to what I do. I have processes that connect to that systematic approach. And that those things become the foundation for how I get the work done. Because that's what those things are. You want to go to work in a business or have your own business. The business is the platform from which everything else happens. Without the business, you don't get to do hair, except on mom. And you want that platform to be strong. You want that platform to be solid. And so when you talk about, and I've known so many great creative hairdressers who became really great and creative business owners. One of the most renowned, is Van Council, in Atlanta, one of the most successful multi-million-dollar salon operation, $20-some million a year, and just, amazing. And starting in the industry as a great cutter, as a great creative person, became a stage personality, had all that stuff, but managed to get to the other side. But when you talk to him about how he got there, it's all about systems. It's all about processes. It's all about mentors in business. He sought them out. He's like, I'm going to go know the best hairdresser owners in America, and did the travel and put himself out there. And again, the things that made him a successful business person were very different than the things that made him a successful hairdresser. But he actually found his way there, building on his creativity and his right-brained, kind of mentality. And you can do that, but you have to recognize who you are, and you have to recognize what it takes to be successful. And that's the biggest challenge that most of us have. Yeah. And by the way, on the technical side, I say we understand that part. Look, we have way too many people who don't make it in the industry for all kinds of reasons. And we haven't talked about this. I believe the number one reason that people fail today is more so than in the past, is we've become a part-time industry. Almost 70% of the industry works 24 hours a week. I don't know how we call ourselves a profession easily when we step back and go, well, almost everybody's part-time. I don't know any part-time professions. I don't know, as a part-time person, kind of that line between professionalism and not. Now, I think you can be very professional as a part-time person if you have earned your professional stripes. And I don't believe a license gets you there. Your license is
Mhm.
step one in becoming a professional. So I think that's another challenge. You want to own your own business. If you're in that almost 70% who are part-time, that's a challenge. Um,
Hmm. No, I agree.
if
So
I,
I think networking is huge, like building that community of people around you. And I would argue even, but I'm just like a super curious person. So I
Mhm.
understand that this might not be but I listen to podcasts like on NPR of like how I built this, of other industries and
Absolutely.
other,
Yep.
it doesn't have to just be like our friends and I think it's great because
Right.
it's relatable. Oh my gosh, does
Yep.
it feel good to talk to another school owner that
Hmm.
understands like exactly what you're going through? But I've learned even like little things just from that. And there's it's never been more accessible than it is today to hear from like the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world and what they did. And it validates, I think, a lot in me
Yep.
of like, okay, well, this wasn't just like, oh, you woke up overnight and did this. Number one. Number two, the challenges are similar and you still have to problem solve. You still have to, kind of work your way around it. And I think, the message I think that everyone can agree on is like you have to build that community that you trust. Like, don't, again, there's something going around on like social media of like, I don't want to listen to the person that I'm butchering this, but if I don't want to live that life, I'm not listening to their advice, right? Like essentially is what it
Yep.
is. You have to be careful about who you listen to. And if you end up listening to the wrong person, okay, we'll fix it. We don't have to like live in that space where now it's, oh, I've been burned by this company and that, okay, like we got to move on. We don't have time for that. Like, okay, so somebody like didn't give you honest, truthful information. Okay, like we got to keep going. And I think like that's important too. But I want to ask you, and this is going to be a complicated question, but I do want to
Love it.
ask you generally what are the biggest changes in the next like 5 years that you kind of can predict or kind of see coming? Are there things that you're like, we've got to fix this right now in schools and in young stylists to get for this to keep going, for this industry to stay as thriving, as it is?
No, that's a great question. It is a complicated question. It is a complicated question, but it's a great one. So going back to this really big idea of misinformation, and it's having, in my opinion, a dramatic effect on the world. If you follow the news, again, forget about individual politics, but if you follow the news, the world's kind of messy right now. And it's messy often because governments are changing. Again, forget about politics, whatever way it's going, but change creates messiness, and discomfort for people. And I believe in the larger world, until our institutions kind of get their acts back together and we can trust them, whether it's the media, whether it's governments themselves, and a whole lot of other things, life will continue to be kind of messy. Same is true of our industry. So I believe we've never been messier, quote unquote, than how we are today as an industry, because emotions and lack of great information is driving so many people in the wrong direction, including all that part-time stuff. I believe it's being driven a lot by misinformation, because people believe you can be successful that way. And I think that's its own challenge. So step one is I hope that we will soon get a handle as an industry on the facts. I think that's important to say. Kind of independent of that, I would say the following. I would say independence is going to continue to grow. And I would say for all the wrong reasons. But we don't have that kind of funnel of great information yet. We still have a lot of misinformation on our industry. And that sets people up for how they think about the future. So independence is going to continue to grow. We have about 110,000 people in suites today, out of 850,000 people who work. It's probably not going to slow down until we hit about 200,000, which means more self-employed people. And again, that's very, very high risk. Because so many people are moving towards self-employment, we're seeing something that's been really important for the industry for decades now, which is retail. And retail, which has become very controversial, which is really weird. I don't even understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how the hell did retail become controversial? I don't see in other industries, that selling stuff has become controversial that relates to the business we're in. I mean,
Uh-huh.
having lived in the industry when retail was just like a thing, a thought, it wasn't big. Like when I came into the industry, Redken, the original founder it was still an independent company. We had no Paul Mitchell. We had no Matrix. They came a few years later. You can go all these big brands that we talk about. Most of them didn't really exist. And so And they came into existence because salons very much supported the idea that, oh, we can bring in more revenue, because as small businesses, we all struggle to stay in business and to find our way to profitability. And we have a high cost of labor in our industry compared to almost any other industry. People think that salon owners keep too much. But the reality is, whether you're in a suite or whether you're a commission stylist, your earnings will probably be similar if your revenue is similar, because it costs money to own a suite. So there's all this makes things complicated. And I think that because it's complicated, it's easy for people to get frustrated in day-to-day work and just opt into something they hear is cool and fun and easy, and which is not any of those things really, and move into suites. So again, back to that misinformation. So independence will continue. I believe, part-time, I hope it doesn't grow any further, but it probably will, because again, the misinformation is going to be with us for a bit. And then because of both those things, retail's going to falter. Retail's never been as big as we would hope it could be, but the best salons in America have proven time and time again that retail is one of the more profitable things they do in their salon. It adds money to the bottom line. It brings education into the salon. It brings culture into the salon. It brings all kinds of good stuff if you do it well. A lot of people, get frustrated with retail because they're not any good at it, because they haven't taken the time to be good at it. Just like, it's no fun cutting hair if you're not good at it. It just isn't. It's not fun doing many things in your work if you're not good at it, And so usually when we're learning, our goal is to become good, so it becomes easier. And it's really important on retail. So that's a big problem. I do think that the whole DIY thing on the consumer level is a thing, and it's going to continue to grow. And I think that the availability of information that wasn't available to the public easily because of social media and because of the internet allows a lot of people to do things themselves, which means they don't need to come to salons. And so I think that's going to remain a really big challenge for us. And I think because of independence and because of a lot of other business factors, that I think we are less professional as an industry today than we were 10 years ago. That's my honest opinion. And so as an industry that's less professional, I think it's easy for some clients to look sideways at us and decide it's not worth spending their money the way they did in the past. And that's not good for the industry. So I think there's things about the industry dynamics that are going to push some clients away. And really importantly to say is we don't have enough clients today to support all the people who are in the industry. A lot of people are part-time because they aren't making enough money full-time. And they don't understand how to get there. We talked about that already. But that's its own challenge. So, really, really messy. Education, I do think digital education is going to be a game changer. We're nowhere near where we need to be to look at digital education. It's okay.
I'm so sorry. I knew this was going to happen like a tackle. I'll be right back.
See you in a drink? Get a drink.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I felt like that was at a really good part also.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Take your time.
I'm good.
You ready?
Yes.
I'm going to start that over again?
Yes. So about I know it was at the digital education and the professionalism at that point. Yes.
Yep. So another trend, is on the education side. Coming out of COVID, we saw a huge kind of cutback in traditional education, live classes. A lot of that's come back now. But not anywhere near what it once was. And digital education during COVID was looked at as a solution. And we saw massive adoption of digital, and then it kind of fell off a cliff. And it's not, I cannot consider digital education in our industry to yet be successful for all kinds of reasons. That's going to change. And that, I believe, should change in a really proactive way within 5 years. And the long haul of education for professionals. I mean, the school model has always embraced digital, and I think, we'll see more of that happen. And that's kind of digital inside of schools and, how things are done. Because to get good in this industry, you have to have that school foundation. You can't learn from home. We learned that during COVID, by the way. But as a professional, once you have that foundation, there's all kinds of ways you can learn. And many will be able to learn by way of digital. That's important to say. But most important is, again, those who want to be self-employed, who don't have the knowledge they need to be successful, it's going to come by way of digital. And it will only come by way of digital when we as an industry learn how to do digital well. And we're a very long way away from it. And outside the industry, going to something you said before about, looking at education outside the industry for yourself. I think when it comes to being in business, small business and small business, dry cleaner, the restaurant, and the salon, the pillars of success are very similar. There's parts and pieces of those pillars that are industry specific, have to use good products, but a restaurant needs to use quality ingredients if they want to be a great restaurant, so you have to figure out where you fit in the quality side of life. But the pillars of business, I think, are well established in certain categories. We are traditionally small businesses, and there's so much great information outside of the industry that you can tap into to learn to be better. And I have spent most of my career, almost from day one, always looking outside, always. And I always find the best stuff outside that's coming our way soon. And so I think it's great to get ahead of this.
Yeah, I think so. Well, and it's still hopeful too. Like, I think that what's good about this is it's not all just like doom and gloom of what's coming. I think that these are all things. I love that you've spoken about the professionalism. I think that there are definitely people in the industry that are moving in that direction. As far as like incorporating this into curriculum, there's so many more. I could spend like weeks at a time just talking to people that have things to add into curriculum, right? Into schools. Now, is that necessarily where it needs to go? Like as you're saying, it needs to continue through your time, but professionalism is big. Professionalism is big for me. And I have to be like, I question myself sometimes and being like, well, is that just how I was raised? But I think collectively we can all say that there's professional things that we just have to carry if we want to say, hey, we are as important as doctors and this and that, because we want to scream that, right? Like everyone's screaming the industry, we matter, we're as important, we're as successful, but are we? Like, we have to look in the mirror and say, like, well, again, working, and all the, how we show up to work and the attitudes that we have and all of those things come together. So I think that for me, like that's going to be a big focus and a big takeaway, from this is not necessarily just giving in. Have you heard the salons? I know you have, but the salons just saying that they're just like being held hostage right now by their employees. Like it's something that they literally say and feel, and it's about rules, and the rules being mostly, along the line of professionalism. So, I mean, I definitely think you're spot on in all of this, but also hopeful in what we can do to get better and to continue this career and this path.
Can I add on top of that, the hostage thing? It kind of is a parallel to the industry owes us something, It's different, but it reminds me, because to those who are like, well, I'm being held hostage. You're holding yourself a hostage. That's really what it's like. Don't stop pointing the gun at yourself. It's like, pull the gun away. So, because somehow your behavior or maybe it's lack of systems, maybe it's the wrong system, whatever. It's something about what you've done with your team went sideways. Because again, I know, just like I know hairdressers who've always had breaks and always went to lunch and always took care of their bodies. I know way too many salons who have great teams, who have great culture, where nobody feels they're hostage. The owners don't feel they're hostage. Are they frustrated when someone leaves? Yeah, of course. Every business is, whether it's big or whether it's small. You invest as an owner into people. That's part what you owe people in that transaction, right? Of you're going to come to work and I'm going to give you certain things. And that happens in there if you're doing it well. So to anybody who feels they're being held hostage, I think you need to really look at yourself and figure out, how do I unwind this? Because the reality is, whatever you're feeling is, there's probably a lot of realness to it. But I don't think we should be blaming the employees.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, it goes back to that negative talk that you hear or see on social media, or you hear people, talking. And we've always said that when we have legacy students, so if we have somebody that comes in and they're like, oh, my aunt did hair, or my sister did this or whatever, they're probably successful. Those people that recommended this industry and recommended for them to do this are probably successful, because the ones that aren't are just bashing the industry and just really not encouraging it. So I think it's important to know, like, to look at the path again and whose advice you're taking.
And to build on that real quick, is to say, I love what I do so much, in part because I know so many successful people, or bump into, sometimes I don't know them, but I learn their experiences. I hear about them. I observe them. There are just so many success stories that I know that is possible for almost anybody. Everybody has to get there their own way, a different way, but too many people get blocked, and especially early in their careers, because they don't see what I see. They don't have the opportunity to see what I see. And that's where context, again, is so important, where I hope some people listening to us today will go, okay, I can do this. Like, I'm not feeling confident right now, but I heard what I heard and I can do this, because I really do believe almost anybody can, but you need to find the right place to do your work, whether you're an employee or an independent. Where you choose to be is a huge, huge factor in what's going to happen to you. Go to the right place, and you have to understand yourself. And what do I need? Like, do I need more education? Do I need guidance? Do I need to be around people? Do I need to be by myself? Do I like it quiet? Do I like it frantic? I have hairdresser friends who love the crazy energy in a crazy, busy, never stopping salon. I know hairdressers who are like, oh my God, I work, how you doing? It's like, oh, I worked 12 hours yesterday. I'm like, oh my God. It's like, oh, I had a blast. I was killing it. So there is that, which is why I can always say to anybody who asks me about this industry, who doesn't understand, people in my life who aren't part of this, like, it's amazing. It's amazing, what this industry can do, for people who are coming into it, and the life it can give them if they pay attention, if they learn, if they have an open mind, and if they're willing to work hard.
Yes. Well, I agree. And I'm so thankful that we had this time today. I know that you are super busy, so I want to keep our time allotted, but I'm so thankful that you're here with us, and thankful that we got to chat today. Cause I think for younger stylists, hearing this all from somebody that has been doing this, and it's just, you're trustworthy, and we're so thankful for that. So where can we follow you?
Well, before you say that, I've got to say, kudos to you, Bobbi, for everything you're doing. Like, because you become the voice of beauty schools and beauty educators and beauty teachers. It's pretty amazing what you've accomplished with this podcast. So, I mean, I see who your guests are, and I'm just like, what the? How is she pulling this off? Like some of the most important and renowned people in the entire industry, and to bring that to your segment of the industry, it's really powerful, so kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
You're really good. You're really good at it. And I've enjoyed this. So Instagram is the best place to find me. I don't do as much as I used to do on there, but I still try to post several times a week. I love to share quotes and inspiration, but most importantly, it's the best way to reach me. I answer every DM anybody sends me. And my Instagram handle is GORDNM. Real simple. It's Gordon M, but only with the first O. We'll leave out the second O. And
awesome. Well, we'll make sure that we have that below in the bio as well, in the episode notes, and website too.
Website, socialbeautymakers.com and beautycastnetwork.com. And Beautycast Network is also on Instagram. You can DM us there. And those are the best place. And my podcasts, both Beautycast Network, Mastering Beauty, and Social Beauty Makers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. And make sure that if you are following along, that you like, subscribe, you do all the things to help us out, to keep this going. And we're just so thankful for this time today. So Gordon, thank you. And we will talk soon. Hopefully we have episode 2 coming someday.
I hope so.